I stood in my childhood living room watching my mother's lips move, but all I could hear was my own heart cracking. Megan needs the money more than you. You're being selfish. Selfish. For wanting my own wedding. My father studied the carpet. My sister sobbed on the couch her third divorce, and somehow I was the villain. They'd already taken my deposit. $15,000. Gone without asking. But they didn't know what I'd found buried in my mother's email, a single sentence that would expose everything they'd hidden for 35 years. Have you ever discovered your own family saw you as expendable? The stories on this channel are created solely for entertainment, educational, and storytelling purposes. While some stories are inspired by real situations, submitted by viewers via email, most details have been fictionalized, combined, or altered. My name is Jessica Parker. I'm 35 years old, a senior claims analyst at a mid-sized insurance company, and I've spent my entire adult life proving I don't need anyone. Looking back now, I realize that was never strength. It was survival. I bought my first apartment at 25, paid my own way through college with scholarships and weekend shifts at a diner where the tips barely covered my textbooks. My parents never offered to help, and after a while, I stopped expecting them to. "You're so capable, Jessica," my mother would say whenever I mentioned struggling. "You don't really need us." So I learned not to need them. The last time my mother asked how I was really doing was 8 years ago after my emergency appendectomy. She called once, never visited. I told myself that was fine. I told myself a lot of things back then. Then I met Daniel. Daniel Mitchell is a civil engineer, methodical patient, the kind of man who notices things other people miss. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 6 months, when he said something that cracked open a door I'd kept locked for decades. "You don't have to be strong with me, Jess." Nobody had ever said that before. Nobody had ever seen that my strength wasn't a choice, it was armor. Daniel also saw my family clearly in ways I couldn't. After Sunday dinners at my parents' house, he'd get quiet on the drive home. One night he finally said it. "Your parents seem more comfortable around Megan, like they need her to need them." I didn't understand what he meant, not then. Megan is my younger sister, 31, beautiful in that fragile way that makes people want to protect her. She was in the middle of her third divorce when everything fell apart. Third, the family narrative was always the same. Megan was unlucky in love, too trusting, deserved better. Nobody mentioned that she'd married her first husband after 6 months of dating her second, after 8 months her third, after 5. Nobody mentioned the pattern, and nobody mentioned the money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 months before my wedding was supposed to happen, something miraculous occurred. My parents offered to contribute $15,000 toward the ceremony. My mother announced it at Sunday dinner like she was presenting a gift from royalty. "This is for you, Jessica, for your special day." I cried, not because of the money, because of what it represented. Finally, after 35 years, I mattered enough to invest in. I planned the wedding around a $35,000 budget, $20,000 from Daniel's and my savings, plus the promised $15,000 from my parents. I put down a $12,000 deposit on a beautiful venue. Non-refundable, but I wasn't worried. Why would I be? It was a promise from my parents. What I didn't notice was my grandmother watching from the end of the table that night. Eleanor, 82, sharp as ever, but quiet in ways that seemed like age. She'd always been gentle with me, a squeeze of my hand under the table when Megan interrupted me, a knowing look when my accomplishments got glossed over. Once, while we washed dishes alone, she whispered, "I see it all, Jessica. I always have. I just never knew how to say it without destroying everything." I didn't understand then either. The night before everything changed, I was watching television with Daniel when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Family meeting tomorrow evening. Something important to discuss." I showed Daniel. Probably wedding planning stuff. He looked at the message for a long time. His jaw tightened in that way it did when he was holding something back. "What?" I asked. "Nothing, just be prepared." "Okay." I laughed it off. By the next night, I would understand exactly what he meant. The family meeting was not about wedding planning. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into my parents' living room. The space felt smaller, somehow charged with an energy I couldn't name. My father sat in his armchair, studying the carpet like it held the answers to questions nobody had asked. Megan was curled on the couch, a wad of tissues clutched in her hand. her mascara already smudged, and my mother stood in the center of the room like a general preparing to deliver orders. "Jessica, we need to talk about the wedding." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "We need you to postpone it." She said the words like she was discussing a change in dinner plans. "Megan's divorce is getting complicated. She needs a better lawyer, and the costs are significant. We need to redirect the $15,000 we promised you." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Postpone, Mom, the venue is booked. The invitations are already printed. We sent them out last week. Then contact the venue and get a refund. The deposit is non-refundable. $12,000. It says so right in the contract." My mother waved her hand like I was being dramatic about a minor inconvenience. "Then we'll figure something out. The point is, the wedding should be postponed. It's not appropriate to celebrate when your sister is going through such pain." I looked at Megan. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just sat there sniffling, playing the victim in a crisis she had created for the third time in 7 years. I looked at my father. He continued his intense examination of the carpet fibers. Nobody apologized. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody acknowledged that they were dismantling the one moment in 35 years when I had actually felt like I mattered to this family. It wasn't a discussion. It was an announcement. "You've always been the strong one, Jessica," my mother added as if this were a compliment. "You'll understand." I understood perfectly. I just didn't say so. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after that meeting, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The math played on repeat in my head. $12,000 already paid. Non-refundable. $15,000 promised and now stolen. Daniel and I had $8,000 left in savings. That was it. By the time I got home, I had made my decision. I called the venue the next morning. "I need to confirm my booking and make an additional payment." "Of course, Ms. Parker. Your remaining balance is $8,500 for the reception package." "I'll pay it today." That afternoon, my mother called. "Did you contact the venue about the refund?" "I did. They don't do refunds. The money is gone." She sighed heavily, as if I had personally inconvenienced her by following the terms of a contract I signed based on her promise. "That's very inconvenient, Jessica." "Yes," I said, "it is." I didn't tell her I was keeping the date. I didn't tell her about the payment I had just made. I let her believe the wedding was dead. 3 days later, I called Aunt Patricia. She was my mother's younger sister, though you wouldn't know it from how the family treated her. Patricia had committed the unforgivable sin of marrying a plumber instead of a professional. She raised 2 kids on a modest income and was never quite welcomed at Parker gatherings. But she had always been kind to me in ways my own mother never managed. Birthday cards with handwritten notes, occasional phone calls my mother never knew about. "Aunt Pat, I need to understand something. This isn't the first time Mom and Dad have helped Megan financially, is it?" There was a long pause. Then I wondered when you'd ask. She told me everything. The first divorce had cost my parents $35,000. The second, $42,000. Various emergencies over the years added another $50,000 or more. The total made me dizzy. Over $127,000 in 12 years, all funneled to my younger sister while I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college. Why didn't they ever help me like that? Patricia's answer carved itself into my heart. "Because you never needed it, honey. And because your mother always said you had your own life, that you didn't need them anymore. But Megan stays close. Megan calls every day. Megan makes them feel like parents." The truth crystallized in that moment. They needed her to need them, and I had committed the unforgivable crime of becoming independent. But Patricia wasn't finished. "There's something else," she said, hesitating. "Something I saw last month when I was at your parents' house. Your mother left her email open on the computer. I wasn't snooping, but I saw an exchange between her and your father. About you, about Megan. What did it say?" I took a photo. I didn't know if I would ever show anyone, but I think you need to see it now. My phone buzzed with the screenshot. The words blurred, then sharpened into painful clarity. "Megan will stay close to us. She needs us. Jessica has Daniel now. She doesn't need us anymore. We should focus our resources on the daughter who will actually be here for us." I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone down and stared at the wall for a very long time. I wasn't overlooked because I was strong. I was written off because I was independent. My parents had made a calculated decision years ago. They chose to invest in the daughter they believed would care for them in old age. And they wrote off the daughter who had the audacity to build her own life. 35 years. 35 years I had spent trying to prove I was worthy. good grades, self-reliance, never asking for anything, never being a burden. I thought if I was perfect enough, they would finally see me. But they didn't want to see me. They had already decided I didn't matter. That night, I didn't cry. I felt something unexpected instead. Lightness, like a rope I hadn't known I was carrying, had finally been cut. The first week I let myself grieve. I cried. I raged. I despaired. Daniel held me through all of it without trying to fix anything. The second week, I started thinking. My mother had already begun telling people that I had volunteered to postpone my wedding, that I was sacrificing for Megan out of love. She was rewriting my story, turning me into a supporting character in my own life. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. "I want to tell the real story." Over the next few weeks, I prepared. I confirmed the venue booking. I added an audiovisual package for $300. I did not send cancellation notices to guests. I collected evidence. Patricia screenshot my own records, a timeline of Megan's divorces, and exactly how much each one had cost. I built a simple presentation, facts, not dramatics, truth, not revenge. Daniel found me at 2 in the morning one night staring at my laptop in the dark. "I keep thinking about Grandma Eleanor," I told him. "She's been silent for 30 years. I see her face every time my mother talks over me, every time she looks away. And I don't want to become her. I love her, but I don't want to spend 30 years accumulating regret because I was too afraid to make someone uncomfortable. So, what's the alternative?" "I've been silent for 35 years, Daniel, and it changed nothing. They still don't see me." I turned to look at him. What's left to lose if I finally speak? 6 weeks after that family meeting, everything was ready. My mother called one last time. "Have you told the guests about the postponement?" "I'm handling it," I said. I looked at the guest list on my laptop. 118 names, family, church friends, neighbors who had known the Parkers for 30 years. Every single one of them had heard my mother's version. The touching story of how Jessica chose to step back for her struggling sister. "They want a ceremony," I murmured after I hung up. Daniel looked at me, and I closed the laptop. My expression was calm, resolved. "They'll get one." The venue looked exactly as I had imagined when I first booked it. White flowers arranged in elegant clusters, afternoon sunlight streaming through tall window, 118 guests settling into chairs draped in ivory fabric. Everything was perfect, except for the bride who had no intention of getting married that day. I watched from the bridal suite as my parents arrived. My mother wore the mother of the bride outfit she had purchased months ago. Returning it would have raised questions she wasn't prepared to answer. She smiled at guests, accepted compliments on the beautiful venue, played the role of proud mother with practiced ease. My father followed behind her, shaking hands, nodding at old friends, pretending everything was normal. Megan came alone. She looked subdued, uncertain. My mother had insisted she attend to support me through this transition, whatever that meant. She probably expected some kind of sad announcement about postponement, followed by sympathetic hugs and reassurances that family comes first. Grandmother Eleanor sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, taking everything in with that quiet awareness I had noticed my whole life. She knew something was different today. I could see it in the way she held herself. Susan Mitchell, Daniel's mother, sat nearby. She had flown in from Florida 2 days earlier. I hadn't told her the details, only that something complicated was happening. She didn't press for more information. She just showed up. That was what she did. Behind the curtain at the side of the stage, I stood in my ivory silk pantsuit. Not a wedding dress, something powerful, something intentional. Daniel stood beside me, his hand warm on my back. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "No," I admitted. "But I'm sure of one thing. I can't be silent anymore." "Why now?" I thought about the question. Because every time I stayed silent to keep the peace, I lost a piece of myself. An opinion left unspoken, a feeling swallowed down, a boundary erased like it never existed. 35 years of slowly disappearing Daniel. 35 years of making myself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. And now I have nothing left to lose. They took my wedding. They took my story. They told everyone their version of events while I sat there saying nothing. The only thing I have left is the truth, and I will not let them take that too. I stepped through the curtain and walked onto the stage. The room fell silent when they saw me. I watched confusion ripple across faces. Where was my dress? Where was the ceremony? My mother half rose from her seat in the front row. Her face shifted through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, concern, then something darker when she saw me reach for the microphone. "Jessica, where's your dress? What's happening?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I looked out at the 118 people who had gathered expecting a celebration. "Thank you all for coming. I know you expected a wedding today." I let the words settle. Instead, I want to share a story. My story. The real one. The screen behind me flickered to life. The first slide showed text messages from my mother. "You're being selfish. Megan is suffering. You've always been the strong one." The words hung there in damning clarity. 6 weeks ago, my parents informed me that my wedding would be canceled to pay for my sister's third divorce. They didn't ask. They informed. They told me the $15,000 they had promised was being redirected to Megan. They told me to contact the venue and get my deposit back, knowing full well it was non-refundable. The second slide appeared, a timeline of Megan's 3 marriages with the costs beside each one: $35,000, $42,000. The current divorce still ongoing. Murmurs spread through the audience. I saw people leaning toward each other, whispering, doing the math. Over $127,000 in 12 years, all for my sister. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college. I never asked for help because I learned early that asking meant being told I was too capable to need anything. The third slide made my mother go pale. The email screenshot. Her own words highlighted in yellow: "Megan will stay close to us. She needs us. Jessica has Daniel now. She doesn't need us anymore. We should focus our resources on the daughter who will actually be here for us." I let the silence stretch before I continued. "They told everyone here that I volunteered to postpone, that I chose to sacrifice for Megan out of love. That's the story my mother has been telling for weeks, but I didn't choose anything. My wedding was taken from me because my parents decided years ago that I wasn't worth investing in. Not because I was strong, because I was independent. And in their eyes, that meant I had already left them." My mother stood up, her face flushed with fury. "Jessica, stop this immediately. This is completely inappropriate. You're embarrassing yourself." My father remained frozen in his seat, staring at the floor like he had at the family meeting. Megan rose too, mascara already running down her cheeks. "Jessica, please. This isn't fair. You don't understand what I've been going through." But before I could respond, something unexpected happened. Grandmother Eleanor, 82 years old and frail in body but not in spirit, slowly pushed herself up from her chair. Aunt Patricia, seated beside her, reached out to steady her elbow. The room went quiet again. Everyone knew Eleanor. Everyone respected her. Her voice trembled, but it carried across the silent venue. "I have been silent for 30 years. I watched my daughter treat these 2 girls differently since they were children. I watched Jessica achieve and be ignored. I watched Megan fail and be rewarded. I told myself it wasn't my place to say anything. I had already lost the right to criticize Linda when I opposed her marriage all those years ago, so I stayed quiet." My mother turned white. "Mother, how dare you?" Eleanor continued as if Linda hadn't spoken. "But silence doesn't keep the peace. It just lets the wound fester until it poisons everything. Jessica is telling the truth, every word of it, and I am ashamed that I didn't say so sooner." In the chaos that followed, I noticed something. Megan was standing alone, crying, looking around desperately for someone to comfort her, someone to take her side. But nobody was looking at her. For the first time in 31 years, Megan Parker was the one being ignored. The one whose voice didn't matter. The one the room had decided wasn't the priority. It wasn't revenge. It was just symmetry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a tarnished silver bracelet, thin and delicate, worn from years of love. I slipped it onto my wrist. My grandmother gave me this when I was 10 years old. She said it was for her Jessica, who shines even when no one is watching. I looked at Eleanor, my eyes burning with tears. I refused to let fall. "This is the only thing I'm keeping from this family, because this is the only thing that was ever given to me with real love." I stepped down from the stage. Daniel took my hand. Together we walked toward the exit without looking back. Behind us, 118 guests sat in stunned silence. My parents stood isolated in the center of the room. Megan cried alone, and for once no one rushed to comfort her. Outside, the afternoon sun was golden and warm on my face. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Grandmother Eleanor stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Jessica, wait!" "Grandma, I want to come to your real wedding. If you have one, if you'll have me." I crossed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her fragile shoulders. "I'd like that, Grandma, very much." I held my grandmother in that golden afternoon light, and for a moment, everything felt simple. But the weeks that followed taught me that speaking the truth comes with a price not everyone is willing to pay on your behalf. 2 weeks after the revelation, reality arrived in my inbox. Mrs. Henderson, a 67-year-old pillar of my parents' church community, sent me a long email that I still remember word for word. "I understand you were hurt," she wrote, "but the way you shamed your parents publicly is not how a daughter should behave. The Bible teaches us to honor our father and mother. You have broken that commandment. I pray you will realize your mistake and ask for their forgiveness before it is too late." She wasn't alone. Other messages followed. Some from people I had never met, strangers who heard the story secondhand and felt entitled to judge. Ungrateful, cruel, attention-seeking. A few even suggested I had fabricated the evidence to destroy my family's reputation. Only a small minority reached out with support, and they did so quietly, privately, as if afraid to be seen agreeing with me. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent a text that simply said, "I saw what they did to you for decades. You were brave." A woman from my mother's book club messaged me anonymously. "My sister was treated the same way. I wish she had been strong enough to speak up." For the first time since I stepped onto that stage, I questioned myself. Sitting alone at midnight reading Mrs. Henderson's email for the 5th time, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Did I do the right thing? I opened my laptop and began to type. Not a reply to Mrs. Henderson, just words for myself, trying to untangle the knot of guilt and doubt in my chest. Honoring your parents doesn't mean letting them walk over you. Loving family doesn't mean suffering injustice in silence. And being ungrateful. Ungrateful would be betraying myself to please people who never saw me. I was grateful for 35 years. I stayed silent. I sacrificed. I disappeared. And they still chose Megan. So, what was the point? To keep being invisible, to keep being the last choice? No. Setting boundaries isn't ungrateful. Setting boundaries is survival. And if some people call that betrayal, then they never understood me to begin with. I closed the laptop without sending anything. I didn't owe Mrs. Henderson an explanation. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. 3 weeks after the revelation, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Aunt Patricia, and her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Jessica, Grandma collapsed. She's at St. Mary's Hospital. You need to come now." I don't remember the drive. I only remember walking into the sterile white corridors and finding Patricia in the waiting room, her face drawn with worry. The doctor explained that Eleanor had experienced a blood pressure spike, likely stress-induced. She was stable but needed rest. Patricia pulled me aside before I could enter the room. "There's something you need to know. Your mother has been calling Eleanor every single day since the event, screaming at her, calling her a traitor, telling her she is no longer her mother." The air left my lungs. I had known there would be consequences, but I hadn't imagined my mother would turn her rage on an 82-year-old woman. I felt the guilt crash over me like a wave. I had dragged Eleanor into this. I had let her stand up for me. And now she was lying in a hospital bed because of my mother's cruelty. When I entered her room, Eleanor looked small and fragile against the white sheets. But her eyes brightened the moment she saw me, and before I could say a word, she spoke. "Don't you dare blame yourself. I can see it all over your face. Grandma, if you hadn't stood up for me, I have had high blood pressure for 20 years, Jessica. This was not your fault." She reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "The only thing I regret is 30 years of silence. You gave me the courage to finally speak. That is a gift, not a burden. But Mom is blaming you. She's been calling you every day." Eleanor's expression hardened for just a moment. "Your mother is angry because I told the truth, not because the truth was wrong." Later that night, Daniel found me in the hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning. He brought coffee and sat beside me without saying anything for a long time. "I thought I was ready for this," I finally said. "But I wasn't ready for Grandma to pay the price. She made her own choice. You didn't force her." "I know, but still." I stared at the coffee growing cold in my hands. Mrs. Henderson says I'm ungrateful. The church people think I'm cruel. And now Grandma is in the hospital because of my mother's anger. Do you regret it? I sat with the question for a long time before answering. No, I don't regret telling the truth. I regret that the truth hurt people I love. But that's not the same as regretting the truth itself. Daniel nodded. So what now? Now I keep going. I didn't survive 35 years of invisibility just to crumble because some people disapprove. I thought of Eleanor, 82 years old, standing up after 3 decades of silence. If she could do that, I could handle some angry emails. Back at work, I noticed the whispers, conversations that stopped when I entered a room, glances that slid away when I looked up. My manager, Margaret, called me into her office, and I braced myself for the worst. I've heard things, she said, about a family situation. I waited. I don't care about your personal life. I care about your work, and your work is still excellent. She paused. But if you need a few days to handle things, I understand. Thank you, but I'm okay. Work is what keeps me grounded. Good, then get back to it. Simple, professional, exactly what I needed. The months that followed brought consequences I had not anticipated, though not for me. Without our parents' funding, Megan's divorce dragged on for 8 months. Her husband's lawyer discovered she had secretly withdrawn $15,000 from their joint account. The court called it dissipation of marital assets and ruled against her. Instead of 50%, Megan received only 40%. She lost an additional $20,000 because of her own actions. She called me once about 3 weeks after the revelation. Her voice was thick with tears. Jess, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how much You knew Megan. Every time I was interrupted, and you kept talking. Every time I achieved something, and you manufactured a crisis. You knew. You just didn't care because it benefited you. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. I paused. I don't hate you, Megan, but I have nothing left to give you. Not anymore. I hung up before she could respond. 4 months after the revelation, something remarkable happened. Megan called our parents asking for money to cover unexpected legal fees. She used her usual tactics, the crying, the helplessness, the declaration that she didn't know what she would do. And for the first time in her life, our mother said no. We can't, Megan. Not right now. People are watching everything we do. Megan was stunned. You're saying no because of what people think, not because you believe it was wrong. Our mother's silence was answer enough. 6 months after the revelation, Megan met someone new. His name was Bradley. Wealthy, charming, living in Seattle, nearly 3,000 miles away. Within 8 weeks, she announced she was moving to be with him. My mother called me, her voice trembling. Megan is leaving, moving across the country. She said she'll visit, but... I waited. She's not going to visit, is she? I don't know, Mom. You'll have to ask her. But we both knew the answer. The daughter they had invested $127,000 in, the one they believed would stay and care for them in old age, was gone, chasing another man, another fresh start. The daughter they wrote off was the only one who would have actually been there, but that daughter was no longer available. Daniel and I set a new wedding date. Small venue, seaside restaurant, 25 guests, $6,000 paid entirely by ourselves. Grandmother Eleanor would sit in the front row, fully recovered. Aunt Patricia would be there with her family. Susan, Daniel's mother, would fly in from Florida. My parents were not on the list. A week before the wedding, a letter arrived in my mother's handwriting. I read it twice before setting it down. What are you going to do? Daniel asked. I'm going to write back. But first they need to understand something. What? That showing up isn't the same as showing up for someone. And they've never learned the difference. I never did write back to my mother's letter. Some things don't need words. Some things just need time. 3 months after that letter arrived, I married Daniel in a seaside restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. 25 guests, simple white flowers on every table. The sound of waves drifting through open windows. It was everything the first wedding was supposed to be and nothing like it at all. I wore a dress I chose myself. No designer label. No family heirloom passed down through generations, just a simple ivory dress that made me feel beautiful when I looked in the mirror. That was enough. For the first time in my life, that was enough. There was no father to walk me down the aisle. I walked alone. not because I was bitter or making a statement. I walked alone because I didn't need anyone's permission to choose my own future. I had spent 35 years waiting for my parents to hand me my worth. That morning, I finally understood that worth was never theirs to give. Daniel waited at the end of that short aisle, tears already forming in his eyes. He had seen me at my lowest. He had held me through the rage and the grief and the doubt, and here he was still choosing me. That was what love looked like. Not need, not obligation, choice. Grandmother Eleanor sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief she had probably owned for 50 years. Beside her sat Susan Daniel's mother, who had flown in from Florida without asking a single question about the family drama. The two women had never met before that weekend, but they shared something I couldn't quite name: a quiet understanding, a recognition of what it meant to simply show up. When we exchanged vows, I said words I had written at 3 in the morning, words that came from somewhere deeper than I knew I had. You were the first person who saw me, not because I was strong enough to handle everything, but because I was worth seeing. You taught me that love isn't about being needed, it's about being chosen. Every day, on purpose. Daniel's voice was thick when he replied, I promise to always ask how you're really doing. And I promise to wait until you're ready to answer honestly, even if it takes time, even if it's hard, because you're worth waiting for. After the ceremony, Eleanor pulled me aside. Her embrace was fragile but fierce, the kind of hug that says everything words cannot. You remind me of myself when I was young, she said. Really? I was also the daughter who didn't cause trouble, who took care of herself, who everyone assumed was fine. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. I also had to choose between family expectations and my own life. What did you do? Her smile was sad. I chose wrong. I stayed quiet. I kept the peace. And I lost pieces of myself I never got back. She cupped my face in her weathered hands, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. I am so proud of you for choosing right. At the reception, I stood before my 25 guests. These were the people who had stayed: Aunt Patricia and her family, Eleanor, Susan, colleagues who had become friends, friends who had become family. I want to say something, I began. Not about today, but about the journey that brought me here. I looked at Eleanor, still dabbing her eyes. At Patricia, who had risked her relationship with her sister to tell me the truth. At Susan, who asked no questions and simply showed up. I used to think leaving family meant failure, that it was ungrateful, that it was giving up. But I've learned something different. I took a breath. Family isn't the people you were born to. Family is the people who choose to stay. I didn't lose my family. I found my real one. People who see me not for what I can do for them, but simply for who I am. Daniel squeezed my hand. And today I'm starting a new family, built on choice, not obligation. On respect, not one-sided sacrifice. On real love, not love with conditions. Eleanor dabbed her eyes. Susan nodded quietly. And I finally understood what home felt like. 1 year after the revelation, my life looked nothing like I had imagined and everything like I had hoped. I was promoted to senior manager at work. Daniel and I closed on a small house in the suburbs with 3 bedrooms, a garden, and room to grow. We were talking about children. On my bookshelf sat our wedding photos, a picture of me with Eleanor taken at the reception, and the silver bracelet displayed in a small glass case. Next to them was an empty frame, for memories not yet made. I still answered my mother's calls occasionally, never for more than a few minutes. I didn't send money, I didn't attend holidays, I didn't hate them. I simply accepted them for who they were. People who loved me the only way they knew how, which wasn't enough, but that was their limitation, not my failure. One evening, exactly 1 year after I stood on that stage and told the truth, my mother called. Her voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. Megan visited for 3 days last month, she said. She was on her phone the whole time. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. I've been thinking a lot, Jessica, about everything, and She trailed off, then tried again. I don't recognize you anymore. You've changed so much. I stood at the window of my new home watching the garden I had planted beginning to bloom. Behind me, Daniel hummed softly as he set the table for dinner. The house smelled like garlic and herbs and home. I took a breath. No, Mom, I haven't changed. I just stopped disappearing so everyone else could be comfortable. Silence stretched across the phone line. For once, my mother had no response, no defense, no redirection, just silence. "I have to go now," I said. "My husband is waiting for dinner." I hung up without waiting for a reply. There was no anger in my chest, no sadness, just peace. I touched the silver bracelet on my wrist, the one Eleanor had given me when I was 10 years old. For my Jessica, who shines even when no one is watching. I had carried those words for 25 years without understanding them. Now I finally did. Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's ready." I turned from the window and smiled at him, not because I had won anything, not because my parents had lost. I smiled because for the first time in 35 years, I was no one's backup plan, no one's sacrifice, no one's afterthought. I was simply finally myself. Sometimes walking away from an old family is the only way to find yourself. And sometimes happiness doesn't come from being forgiven or forgiving anyone. It comes from knowing you deserve love. Not because you're perfect, not because you earned it, but simply because you're you. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it, and that made all the difference. Thank you for listening to Jessica's story. Before you go, I want to share something important that this story teaches us. So many of us grew up believing that being a good daughter means sacrificing everything without complaint. We learned to stay silent to keep the peace. We learned to shrink ourselves so others could feel bigger. We learned that asking for what we deserve makes us selfish or ungrateful. But Jessica's journey shows us a different truth. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Speaking up for yourself is not cruelty. And walking away from people who refuse to see your worth is not failure. It is survival. It is self-respect. It is choosing yourself after a lifetime of being everyone else's last priority. If you recognized yourself in Jessica's story, if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever wondered whether your feelings matter, please know this: they do. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be chosen, not because of what you do for others, but simply because of who you are. Family is not just about blood. Family is about the people who show up, who stay, who love you without conditions. Sometimes finding your real family means letting go of the one you were born into, and that is okay. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story. We share new stories every week about courage, resilience, and finding your voice. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect you? How did you find the strength to speak your truth? Your story might help someone else find their courage. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of love exactly as you are.
Rồi em chỉnh được cái gì? Anh có thể thay đổi cái gì không? Đấy. À, ok ok.
Lấy màu
Đấy,
hồng
được
màu.
rồi.
Lấy màu hồng mới